What if we create technology that will actually allow us to change our own desires? GDP breaks down when you can change your preferences. The uniqueness of GDP measurements rely entirely on fixed preferences. And if you can just say, well, you know what? I used to want to have a giant mansion and a yacht and be really high status and, I don't know, date Victoria's Secret models or whatever those people like to do. And like, now I'm just going to switch it. So you know what I really want? To pet rabbits all day. That's how I started out. I always just wanted a fluffy bunny. Like, anyway, the point is that like our GDP measurements and productivity measurements are utterly unprepared to deal with a world where we can just want what we've got. Like, of course, the dumbass version of this is just Molly, right? The dumbass version of this is you put a little powder in your mouth and then you're just like, great. Wow, you're massaging my hand. This is the most incredible thing. Anyway, Robert Gordon didn't think about that.
Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in. Noah, welcome back. Excited to chat today.
Hey.
Last week, Marc Andreessen dropped his manifesto, Techno-Optimism, and you also wrote a couple pieces on why you're also a techno-optimist, but you have some overlap and you have some differences. So maybe let's start with reactions to the manifesto.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a big fan. I think that during the last 8 or 9 years, we've gotten into this social mode of criticism of everything. Everything is bad. Denunciation is just what we're going to do to everything, and everything is dangerous. And a friend of mine, Jeff Yang, said, Marc Andreessen's manifesto has demonstrated that techno-optimism is a dangerous ideology, and we need to find some way to combat it, or something like that. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, it was just let people say they like stuff. Let people just be enthusiastic about stuff. And that's what I like about the EAC people. There's not a heck of a lot of substance to EAC. Those people are my friends. It's like a lot of pictures of space stations and just like, picture yourself here, like, we are gods and stuff like that. But it's, it's a direct successor to the extropians of the 90s, which I was too young to know about. So I've only read about them in articles and heard about them from people like Kevin Kelly and Tim O'Reilly, who were there and met them. But basically, they're just extremely enthusiastic about technology and feel that like we are living in this age of accelerating technology. It'll lead to sci-fi stuff. We need to accelerate and claim our destiny as blah, blah. That's so great. Like, I love this enthusiasm and this optimism, and I really enjoyed Mark's piece. And that doesn't mean I, agree with everything in the piece. I think that my own writings kind of articulated what I disagree with, where I differ from him. But ultimately, I think it's a good thing to get manifestos like this. Our culture needs this, and this idea of everything is a dangerous ideology. Everything is a culture war that needs to be combated. We need movements in the streets to combat it and resistance. And shut up. Can we dispense with that and move on to a better time in America?
Okay, so let's start with what you agree with. Why are you a techno-optimist? Then we'll get to where you disagree or where you have slight difference of opinion.
Right. So, I mean, I think that viewed broadly, what technology is humanism. Technology or techno-optimism is humanism. The idea that we should discover more stuff. Because discovering more stuff empowers humanity. Now, it doesn't always empower individuals, right? And this is an important, crucial, in fact, distinction. Technology does not always empower individuals. So, for example, digital surveillance technology, right? Where you have the government able to just watch you all the time, as China's government watches people all the time, because it, gets data from all the web cameras everywhere in the whole country. That's obviously lessening individual human choice, right? Individual human freedom. You have a social credit score. So if you, are a mixed martial artist and you demonstrate that MMA is better than, some sort of, I don't know, weaponized Tai Chi by defeating a Tai Chi master in some highly publicized bout. And then, the government basically blackballs you, as happened to the guy who did that. Well, that's obviously reducing human freedom and reducing human choice. So technology is not automatically a libertarian force. It's not automatically an individualistic force. What it is instead is a force that gives society more collective choices. So when you have a society choose to go authoritarian with technology and use technology to become Big Brother, that is a collective choice of society, right? When I say collective, I don't mean that it's a consensus thing like at your college co-op where everybody just decided like, oh yeah, we'll all have a surveillance state. No, that's not what I mean by collective. I mean that the overall organization of human society, blah, 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 came out with this outcome. But, democratic societies obviously come out with very different outcomes. And so, like things like letting everyone have a refrigerator in their house. That's the collective choice of society that leads to more individual freedom, more individual choice. So societies have a collective choice about whether or not to use technology to give individuals in those societies more individual choice. The reason I'm a techno-optimist, the reason I think that discovering more technology is good is that I believe that human society will over time tend to do better things. I think that empowering humanity as a whole ultimately will lead to the empowerment of human individuals more than it will lead to the opposite. I think that the 1984 scenarios will be less common and less important than the, just sort of general increases in standard of living and, human independence and things. I think that Francis Fukuyama will prevail in some sense. Even in the totalitarian countries, you see, the idea of like checkpoints. You can't move between the checkpoints. You can't drive your car or between the checkpoints are rare, right? It's used only in extreme situations. Or the idea that you can't like shop for TVs online or all these things. Even the massive attempts that China uses to control social media, even that is, people still do a lot of talking on social media. And during zero COVID, the censors were just overwhelmed. The Chinese censors just lost. So I think that overall, I sort of have faith, or maybe faith is the wrong word, but expectation that greater social choice will lead to greater individual choice and freedom and happiness, and certainly greater riches and wealth and lack of starvation and more education and, all those good things. More happy people, I think. And so because ultimately human society is for the benefit of humans in some sense. And sort of anti-humanist societies, totalitarian societies tend to flame out. So that's one reason why I agree with Marc. I think the other thing I agree with Marc about is that not nearly enough technology gets invented. Technology has lots of space for acceleration and improvement from our current rates of innovation, from our current amount of technology that we have. There's lots more out there. And in every age, you see stagnationists who basically say, okay, we've discovered all the important stuff. Now it's just cleaning up a few little things. And so far, they've always been wrong. We've always found some new important stuff to discover. And that doesn't mean it may have gotten more expensive to discover some of those things. You may have to have a big, well-funded lab instead of just some random guy in his garage tinkering with some little plants or something or bread mold or whatever, like you would in the past, right? Although that's not actually how penicillin got invented. But okay, but the point is that innovation is getting more expensive, maybe, but at the same time, our societies are getting wealthier, and so we're better able to afford the expense of that increasing, of sustaining innovation. And so I think that there's this fundamental property of technology, right? Which is that the people who invent it don't reap the full benefits of what they invent. The full benefits accrue to other people. And this is why Marc says that technology is philanthropy. But notice that we don't have nearly enough philanthropy in the world, right? We wouldn't rely on philanthropy to create a welfare state or run the government, right? We wouldn't rely on philanthropy to keep the roads upkept or the schools, And so we wouldn't rely on philanthropy for that because people just don't have enough of an incentive to do that philanthropy. And the same way, technology is philanthropy because the people who invent it don't reap all the benefits. The benefits are reaped by people who copy the technology, people who use the technology downstream, and things like that. Just ideas are in the air. Your idea gets out, someone else uses it, and you don't get paid, right? And that lack of incentive to invent is a big reason. Well, it's a problem we have to overcome, right? I mean, it's a thing we overcome. We have the patent system and government research funding and tax credits for R&D for corporations, and these are all mechanisms that we use to overcome the natural incentive problem of technological innovation, which is that the inventors, don't reap the full benefits. So we're trying to give them some benefits, some benefits, and maybe not the full benefits. We're trying to give them some benefits to get them to do more innovation. And it's not enough. It's not there. We haven't fully internalized the externality of innovation. We have, and because of that, that's a very good reason to believe that there's still lots of stuff out there to discover, because we just don't have sufficient incentive to go discover it. The fact that our innovation system starts off broken, right? And it starts off broken because of this externality, and we have to fix it and build it up, from a broken base. That's a reason to believe that there's still lots of undiscovered stuff out there that we haven't had the incentive to go discover. And so I think that there's just so much more out there. So the two big things I agree with Marc about are, number one, in general, more technology is good for humankind. I'm a humanist, and so I believe that humans will benefit from accelerated innovation. And number two, there's lots more left out there to discover. We haven't reached sort of the end of innovation. We haven't picked all the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. So, well, just on that last point, Robert Gordon famously has a book, I believe it's called The Rise and Fall of Economic Growth. And he makes the argument, I believe, that here he credits the sort of fall in the growth rate due to we picked the low hanging fruit, and sort of technological growth or economic growth is just harder now because we've picked the stuff that's easier to do, and now it's just harder. He gestures at some other reasons as well, but I think he says that's the biggest reason. Well, one, is my reading of Gordon correct? And two, are you less sympathetic to that?
Your reading of Gordon is correct, and I am less sympathetic to that. And the reason is because suppose you were to take a Robert Gordon style argument and make it in the, around 1870. And people did. You can read, people were like, all the machines have been invented. We invented the steam engine. That was the big one, guys. And so then nobody had any idea that electricity would be such a big deal, right? And nobody really understood that the internal combustion engine would be such a big deal. And those are sort of those plus public water sanitation stuff. Those are the big and like antibiotics. No one really knew in 1870 that we'd invent something that could basically clobber every bacterial disease on the planet, right? No one knew that. And no one knew that harnessing, people knew about electricity. There's Maxwell's equations, I guess, were written in the late 1800s. But people didn't have any idea. Ben Franklin had flown his kite a long time ago, right? People knew that electricity was a thing. They had no idea that it could just create this easily transferable power that could power all these things. No one could imagine this microphone, this computer screen in 1870. And the innovations, the big general purpose technologies that Gordon talks about, in the Rise and Fall of American Growth are like electricity, internal combustion engine, public sanitation, blah, blah, blah. He's right that those were big, important things. And he's right that there was definitely a lull in productivity growth after we sort of mined out a lot of the possibilities of those things and fully exploited those things. But the thesis is that there's no other such things out there. And you have to have a scientific reason for believing that. And obviously, there's only one electromagnetism in the world, right? There's only one such force. Harnessing the strong nuclear force is not going to help us anytime soon because the strong nuclear force is very short range. The weak nuclear force is just, weak. But then, and gravity only works one way. It doesn't have a repulsion. So there's not really a lot of, we can't repeat something just like electricity, right? But electricity wasn't just like anything that happened before. There was nothing like that before. There's no analog to electricity in like 1820, right? There's just no analog. steam power with steam drivetrains, which is not the same. I guess you could transfer power from in one belt through a factory and stuff like that, but it just wasn't the same as electricity. And in fact, steam engines themselves were that was very different than any of the big technological innovations that had come before, which were mostly about farming and construction, right? New ways to build materials, new ways to pull plows were basically like the horse collar. That was a big deal. Or like agriculture. Before agriculture, there was nothing like agriculture. That was the first and only time that there was anything like finding the fact that you could grow plants in the ground. Like, these general purpose technologies are not predictable. Otherwise, we would have them already. And so someday we may run out of general purpose technologies. In fact, Robert Gordon might be right. We may already have, but I'm betting against it.
Hey, everybody. Erik here with a word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Daffy. Daffy is the most modern and accessible donor-advised fund, and they have a mission I think we can all get behind, helping people be more generous more often. Daffy stands for the Donor Advised Fund for you. With Daffy, it's so much easier to put money aside for charity. You can make your tax-deductible contributions all at once, or you can set aside a little each week or month. And you don't just have to donate cash. You can easily contribute stocks, ETFs, or crypto. Then you can give to more than 1.5 million charities, schools, and faith-based organizations in a matter of seconds. My favorite part about Daffy is that it lets you be more strategic with your giving and tax planning by having a single source of charitable deductions. Plus, you never have to track receipts from your donations again. Daffy does it all for you. It's free to get started, and they're giving Econ 102 listeners a free $25 to give to the charity of your choice. Go to daffy.org/econ102. That's daffy.org/econ102 for a free $25 to give to your favorite charity.
If you're a startup founder or executive running a growing business, you know that as you scale, your systems break down and the cracks start to show. If this resonates with you, there are 3 numbers you need to know: 36,000, 25, and 1. 36,000. That's the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, streamline accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25. NetSuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down costs. 1, because your business is one of a kind, so you get a customized solution for all your KPIs in one efficient system with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need all in one place. Right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist, designed to give you consistently excellent performance, absolutely free, at netsuite.com/102. netsuite.com/102 to get your own KPI checklist. netsuite.com/102.
Lots of people talk about how computerization in the internet was such a bust in terms of productivity. It generated maybe 10, 15 years of rapid productivity growth and then kind of petered out again. There was this little bump and then it petered out. Well, I would say that we're just at the beginning of that, because electricity didn't make its full productivity impact felt for many years after it was invented, because entrepreneurs, and the economists have documented this and talk about this all the time, entrepreneurs had to figure out how to use electricity to revamp their production processes. And the key innovation actually was to have small workstations for manufacturing, where you'd pull the thing from one station to another and work on it independently, instead of just having, this sort of drivetrain. So when you look at the old Mickey Mouse cartoons from the 1930s or 40s or whatever about industrial stuff, it's all this one giant conveyor belt, and Mickey Mouse is trying to escape from the conveyor belt or whatever, right? You always see that you've seen that, right? The escape from the conveyor belt.
Yep.
And there's always a stamping machine, and it's going to crush you and burn you, and you've got to escape. But that is how they did it before electricity. So after electricity, what they instead did, that giant conveyor belt was giant and continuous because it was driven by one big steam boiler at the center of the factory. And with electricity, they figured out, no, actually we can just electric power is so easy to route to anywhere you want. We can just set up all these little workstations instead of this giant conveyor belt. We can just take the piece over to another workstation and add something to it over here and then carry it over here. And then, and so that was a huge innovation. After that, you see productivity from electric powered factories really start to skyrocket. And that took decades. And I think with the internet, we're just now seeing how to do fragmented production of service tasks. So, if you go back 6 years, 5 years, right? Everybody did service tests by going into an office and talking to other people for the same hours per day. They would physically go into the same office and talk to other people. And that's how, office work got accomplished. And now, since the pandemic, you're starting to see finally productivity improvements from remote work technology. And Nick Bloom has documented this. And we're starting to fragment a lot of these production processes. And I see an analogy to how electricity allowed us to fragment the physical production process and increase productivity by doing things in little packets, little distributed packets, instead of in one big, sort of concatenated thing that everyone worked on the same conveyor belt. And so I think that's one thing. Another thing, obviously, is AI. Cliche to say, GPT is going to write our emails for us and do our boring shit for us. I think that's another one. But then also, I think that we've consistently seen that energy use per capita has been an important input into physical technologies. So Peter Thiel famously said that we wanted flying cars. Instead, we got, how many characters Twitter used to have? 140 characters. And then, because digital technologies had replaced physical technologies as the sort of engine of innovation. But there was really a reason for that, right? It was the fact that after the internal combustion engine and oil, which allowed us to exploit oil, right? This huge natural resource of oil that before it was very difficult to exploit. You couldn't burn it in a boiler, right? It wasn't like coal. You had to invent the internal combustion engine, which was a harder thing than a coal boiler. And so so then when after oil, where did we go, right? A lot of people thought we were going to go to nuclear. We're just going to have fission power everywhere. But there were important reasons why that couldn't happen. Everybody talks about regulation, but there's really key reasons why no one ever put a nuclear engine in your car, right? That's just a huge safety risk to put nuclear power in your car. I mean, like a nuclear submarine is the only thing we really do, or aircraft carrier, right? Submarine and aircraft carrier. We have nuclear powered stuff. We have plans for nuclear powered spacecraft that we could do if we want. But to put it in your car, to use it to supercharge transportation, construction machinery, and everything, that's actually something they do in Foundation. If you read Foundation, the first sort of important technology they get is miniaturized nuclear, and which they call nucleics. Which now means something else. But then you had miniaturized little nuclear batteries that you could use for everything. And that at the time was a hope that people had. And it wasn't regulation that killed that. It was just the infeasibility of that. And we may at some point get portable nuclear technology. It will just be something other than that. So after that, we really stopped advancing in terms of energy. And even in the countries that did go with nuclear power, like France went with mostly nuclear power, it's like France's electricity was not that much cheaper than other countries, right? It was greener, right? It was more immune to Russian supply cutoffs, but it was not cheaper. And so nuclear did not produce the bonanza that we expected. And I'm sorry, all you nuclear stands out there. It's not going to anytime soon. Fission will not. Fusion someday will, right? Fusion will be amazing and it will be great. But fission is just, can I go on a little rant here about fission? Okay, so the point is that when I was a kid, I watched this cartoon called Robotech, and you had this spaceship powered by this immense energy source called protoculture, and it was so important that everyone would go to galactic war just to get their hands on protoculture. And then my friends and I were sitting around in I think junior high school thinking like, okay, well, how do you get the energy from protoculture? Like, how does it actually transfer the energy to the spaceship? And my friend said, well, okay, so first you get the protoculture to boil water to make steam. It was just this like ancient technology, but that is how nuclear fission works. You boil water to get steam. You knock rocks together. You knock like heavy rocks together so that their neutrons hit each other, and so they get hot. And then you use that heat to boil water to make steam to turn a turbine like a frickin' coal boiler in the 1800s. That's what nuclear power is, and that. Whereas an internal combustion engine was a new way to get the power out. It wasn't just a new kind of rock to get the power out, right? It was a new machinery to transfer the energy from the rock to the thing. And that's what nuclear did not provide. But oil did provide it, right? The internal combustion engine was an advance in energy extraction technology, not just the thing itself, which is why when people who think we need to use mainly nuclear for stuff talk about energy density. I'm like, my God, man, you're talking about the energy density of the rock itself, not the density of the giant thing, which is this huge tower that looms over the city. Like, that's the actual density you should be talking about. This huge thing required to get the energy from that little rock. It's the extraction machinery, and new sources of power are direct to electric. And this allows us to convert energy from the sun with a solar panel to electricity or a wind tower or whatever, direct to electricity, and then store that in a battery. That is, and battery technology is just advancing incredibly. Toyota just said it's going to start mass production of solid state batteries. Oh my God. Nobody even noticed. That would, if Toyota is not bullshitting, and they may be, but they've been working on it for a long time. If they're not bullshitting, the solid state batteries, if you can make them cheap, will just kick the crap out of anything else because they're just so compact and small and awesome. And battery technology is an advance in energy extraction. And the idea of these power sources that create electricity directly instead of having to go through a steam boiler, right? Or even an internal combustion chamber, though, that is an advance in energy extraction technology. And so in addition to digital technologies like finally realizing the potential of the internet for distributed productivity and AI, those two digital revolutions are underway. But I think that the energy, the fact that solar power has gotten so incredibly cheap and batteries have made it so easy to move solar power around, to move electric power around because you have this direct electricity power. That is a huge technological revolution. And that is something that Robert Gordon just did not even consider, right? He's talking about the internal combustion engine. Well, what about ultra cheap solar power with ultra cheap solid state batteries or, whatever next generation stuff that allows you to just grab energy from the sky, move it directly to electrical charge and hold it in this supercharged thing and put that in a drone, in an appliance, in a car, in a train, in anything you want, a boat, a spacecraft, whatever you want. You can just put a battery in it. A stove, like my friend's company, is making the battery powered stoves and appliances. You can put it anywhere you want. And Robert Gordon didn't even think about that. Right? He was writing a few years before that revolution happened, and he wasn't even thinking about it. And what aren't we thinking about today? What is the next thing that we are not thinking about? And there's possible innovations that even change the meaning of what it means to produce value. So, for example, right now we have Neuralink and some other companies creating computer brain interfaces. It's really easy to get information out of a brain. It's very hard to put information into a brain. But we're going to figure it out eventually. And much mad science and horror will be done on the way. And then people's brains will be hijacked and we'll have zombies and mind control and all those bad things. But remember, I'm a techno-optimist. So I think ultimately society will figure out the way, ways to make sure that doesn't happen much, except in totalitarian regimes. And anyway, we're going to get that. And what if we could just create virtual worlds much better than any VR headset where you can actually feel and smell and experience and blah, 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 right? And AI can generate it all. And you can just live in a fantasy world and you can be, Harry Potter or whatever you millennials like, younger millennials with your Harry Potter fandom. In my generation, we read Wheel of Time, and yes, it sucked, but we read it anyway. So we'll be able to create infinite fantasy worlds for ourselves. And what's the value of that? That won't even be easily measurable, because what are you going to use? Fantasy bucks to buy it? There'll be energy credits that you use to buy server time or whatever in real life, GPUs. I don't know. But it'll be hard to measure. And what if we create technology that will actually allow us to change our own desires? That's something that I worked on an econ paper where we were trying to value that, and we were just there's no unique way to value the change in utility. There's no GDP breaks down when you can change your preferences. GDP relies the uniqueness of GDP measurements rely entirely on fixed preferences. And if you can just say, well, you know what? I used to want to have a giant mansion and a yacht and be really high status and, I don't know, date Victoria's Secret models or whatever those people like to do. And like, now I'm just going to switch it. So you know what I really want? To pet rabbits all day. That's how I started out. But,
You've already done that.
I've already done that. I didn't, like, I never wanted to date Victoria's Secret models. I always just wanted a fluffy bunny. Like, anyway, the point is that, like, what if you can change, it's, have you ever heard that song Soak Up the Sun by Sheryl Crow?
Yeah.
Should we have a podcast where I just like sing things?
Yes,
I just like sing like, I'm gonna soak up the sun, gonna tell everyone.
Song.
Anyway, point is that she has this line, it's not getting what you want, it's wanting what you've got. Our GDP measurements and productivity measurements are utterly unprepared to deal with a world where we can just want what we've got. Like, of course, the dumbass version of this is just Molly, right? The dumbass version of this is you put a little powder in your mouth and then you're just like, great. Wow, you're massaging my hand. This is the most incredible thing. Wow, I'm eating a radish. This is the most incredible thing. And so that's like what MDMA does for your brain for like a few minutes. And then you have like 3 days when you're just depressed as hell and you want to die. So don't do it. But especially if you're prone to depression. But the point is, what if you could just do that sustainably? What if you could just have sustainable Molly and you could just, there's some old Kids in the Hall movie from like the 90s when I was a kid about this, by Brain Candy, I think it's called. Anyway, and it just destroys society. And maybe it will destroy society. Maybe, all we want is just to sit there petting fluffy bunnies. And then if we have robots to cater to all our fluffy bunny needs and magical brain computer interfaces to rewire our brain so that that's all we want, maybe that's the end point of humanity. And we're done. We've reached paradise because we found out that we already had paradise because we just had to change our brains to consider the current world to be paradise. Anyway, Robert Gordon didn't think about that. All right. So I'm ranting because I'm ranting about things that Robert Gordon didn't think about and that he could have thought about had he talked to my PhD advisor, the economist Miles Kimball, who thinks about this stuff all day and is even crazier than I am. So anyway.
Who I also had at some point in Michigan. So shout out to
of course, that's right. He was the Econ 102 professor of Econ 102. Yes. He's our progenitor of this podcast. Yes. His spirit lives. Should have him at some point. And like a lot of these crazy things that I'm saying, yes, we absolutely should. Yes, Econ 102 reunion. I love it. Anyway, so Robert Gordon can't predict the future, and he's just like predicting the past.
Yeah. Well, side note on that, we have an upcoming podcast, I believe, launching next week with Packy McCormick and Julia DeWall. It's a season on nuclear, and you're a guest for one of the episodes. We'll re-release it on this feed as well. So just wanted to plug that. Listeners, stay tuned. Well, just on that note, so if it's less about low-hanging fruit, what do you think is the best explainer of the sort of fall in growth rates? Is it sort of government dysfunction? Is it culture? Is it, what do you think are if you had to pie chart kind of the reason, sort of the reasons why we've had a slowdown, what do you think?
Well, just end of cheap oil, stagnation of energy technology. It's just have you seen the Henry Adams curve? It's this curve of energy use per capita. It's like up, and so the website What the Fuck Happened in 1971, and my eternal like anger at this website will be that it was actually 1973. Otherwise, the website's good. It's 1973 because it was the oil shock. And so if you look at the Henry Adams curve, that's when we roll off the curve, right? We were like, basically human history is like, we start out like, oh, I'm a monkey with a bow. I shoot you. That was like our history for many, many years. And then we're like, oh, I can plant plants in the ground. Energy from plants, and then we go on for several thousands of years and have like kings and knights and other horrible things that we later romanticized for like thousands and thousands of years. And then and then at some point we're like, oh, coal, I could burn that and use it to move a thing. Wow, now like I'm early modern, early industrial humanity, and then things are better. And then we're like a little ways after that, we were like, oh, whoa, I could burn oil in a thing and then have cars and planes and things like that. That's amazing. And gas powered leaf blowers, which are really important. And then and then I can have electricity to move the power around and stuff like that. And we're like, whoa, energy. And then in 1973, OPEC is like, you thought you had cheap energy, but you don't anymore. And then physical innovation craters after that. All the stuff where we could easily, cheaply we made all these new appliances like, oh, now you have a fridge, now you have an oven, now you have this, blah, 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 because we got so much cheap energy. Now that process comes crashing down. And after we stopped getting more and more cheap energy, it became harder to generate productivity gains. And so we said, okay, so instead we're just going to go do some other kind of innovation. We happen to have this computer revolution and nothing, that's low energy. We can just run these server racks pretty cheaply, whatever. I guess we didn't have server racks yet, but we had something like computer chips, and we can run stuff really cheaply. So let's do computer innovation instead of writing all these paper spreadsheets in an office. Let's just do Excel, right? Instead of writing, a whole bunch of like memos and whatever, let's just use email. And so we reaped the productivity gains. And from people say that it's only like the late 90s and early 2000s, but really this productivity boom begins in the late 80s. And like, if you look at a broader set of measurements, it's really from about 1987 to 2004, 1987 through 2004 that this productivity boom happens. So it's not quite 2 decades. And then you see productivity just goes back up. And it goes almost to the like post-war, levels, and then it flattens out again after 2004. So 2005, it's like suddenly it's like, oh, productivity stops, and then what hasn't shown up in the productivity statistics at all is phones, which are I'm like, I know the smartphone is the new sun, and we had a whole decade where like everybody who made smartphone apps and social, mobile, blah, 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 got really rich. And a lot of the people listening to the podcast got rich on that. And I'm happy that you got rich, so that you're able to have a nice ball pit in your house or whatever you enjoy. Whatever rich people like now, I guess it's not dating Victoria's Secret models. That's Gen X-y. Like what do rich like younger millennials want? What does a rich like 33-year-old want these days? Like tell me, younger millennial, what do they want?
I think they want to be able to go on private jets, or net jets, or buy their own
private
someday.
Yeah, got it.
Efficiency, like be able to fly at any time, not have to deal with bullshit. I think it's less about being flashy and more. I mean, obviously, being on a private jet is a flex. So I think like subtle ways to flex.
A
basically.
Flex.
Yeah.
Because like honestly, my younger millennial like rich friends just like mostly live a pretty Spartan existence.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cliche of the CEO who like sleeps on a mattress on the floor in like in a bare little bedroom or whatever. That's real. I've seen that mattress. That's real. Yeah. Anyway, whatever rich people want. I am a skeptic about the actual benefits of the smartphone. I think that the smartphone has improved the world on net. It has not, destroyed society and, just created a dystopia. But I believe that the benefits are much, much smaller than the private returns would indicate. I think smartphones have had lots of negative things, such as the death of privacy, allowing universal tracking, the sort of social isolation that came from social media, and the fact that a lot of the things that political disruption. I think there were just a ton of negative externalities of the smartphone that we haven't really reckoned with, and it was just so fun and addictive. It's the ultimate toy of the smartphone that, and so many of the younger millennial generation got rich off that, right? That it's very hard to confront some of the drawbacks of that. So in terms of me being techno-optimist, I'm like, yes, the smartphone improved society by a little bit. On net, we're a little better off with smartphones than we were without smartphones, but only a little because of so many drawbacks. And so I'm, call me a techno pessimist about smartphones, but I think that they're overrated. They're not bad. They're just overrated. And so But now I think that the technologies that are now being rolled out, including, AI, remote work, robotics, solar, batteries, mRNA, synthetic biology, drones, et cetera. Well, okay, drones are going to be mostly used for war, but I think that these technologies being rolled out are going to make human life a lot better than the generation of technologies we had before. That the 2005 through 2019 innovation wave, that decade and a half of innovation was actually disappointing, and the real good work was going on sort of underneath, behind the scenes, stuff that wasn't ready to be rolled out yet, like mRNA or like remote, like video conferencing technology, things like that. All the AI, of course, that was the decade when like AI was sort of starting to bubble up with the first generation of AI, which we've now retroactively decided to call the old generation ML. Right now generative AI is just becoming AI. Anyway, so then I think that a lot of the important work during that decade and a half was being done on the things that actually would make a difference, but a lot of the things that were being rolled out that had been invented in the late 90s and 2000s that were commercialized in the 2010s were relatively disappointing. And so, but you know what? Things go through waves. It's not a constant. It's not this one hump, right? Because the period of like 1987 to 2004 shows that you can reaccelerate. And sure, it didn't last forever, but it shows that it's not a monotonic thing, and it's a little fly in the ointment of the stagnationists, because you look at this bump in growth, this decade and a half bump in productivity growth, and you're like, okay, well, except for that, we're stagnating. Except for that bump, but then we're like, there'll be another bump and then another bump. And of such small bumps, many large bumps are made. And so I think that I'm optimistic about the suite of technologies that's being rolled out now and its ability to increase not just measured productivity, but human happiness and just improve human society in general, more than the last generation of innovation did. I think we're in a good place right now.
Yeah. So that's a good overview. Let's segue to where you disagree or where you feel differently. Why don't you share some of your disagreements with the piece?
Well, Marc is very libertarian, right? He's very much believes in the veneration. That doesn't mean he's like a libertarian in the sense of not wanting a welfare state. He would like a welfare state. He would like to take care of the poor people. He would like, but and at some level he recognizes the need for like environmental sustainability, even though he puts sustainability in quotes as an enemy force. But ultimately he believes in the sort of valor of the independent inventor, and thinks of the the state and many organs of society as trying to restrain the heroic inventor, the John Galt figure, right? And this makes sense because it really describes, much of that describes his own experience. He was not, like he and one other guy built like the web browser, invented one of the basic pillars of the internet, and then made a company on it and made a bunch of money, and then became venture capitalists and helped other people who did the same thing. So it's the story of Marc's life that, Marc is John Galt, right? He's John Galt. And then, but instead of moving to like a little, secluded valley or whatever with a whole bunch of other inventors, he moved to Menlo Park. But he is basically that. But the point is that is not the only way that the innovation happens. And if all we have is that, we'll be a poorer, slower progressing society. We will not take full advantage of the potential of technological progress if that is what we mainly, if we just have that. We need that. It's good. It's important, but it's only one of the things we need. And so another thing we need is, government funded labs, right? Like government funded lab. If you like the nuclear age, where do you think that came from? Government funded labs. Even Marc got to start working in a government funded lab, right? When he was doing that web browser, he was initially working in a government funded lab. So there's, mRNA was like the the mRNA efforts like Moderna and BioNTech were absolutely funded by venture capital for many years, but they were also funded by like the NIH and NSF. Like, though there was massive amount of government backing that went into that technology, and then when it came time to deploy the technology in the pandemic, BARDA was the key government agency that did purchasing guarantees and helped arrange supply chain things and blah, 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 and basically really accelerated the process of rolling out that mRNA technology in a rapid way when it came time in the pandemic. And so government does a lot. Government funds, doesn't just fund basic research, it biases the corporate tax system toward encouraging innovation. And it, university funding, blah, blah. The patent system obviously is very important. So big corporate labs are also really important. And I think that this is a really underrated segment. I think a lot of progressives talk about the power of government, and a lot of, conservatives and libertarians talk about the power of the sort of independent entrepreneur. But I think that what very few people talk about is corporate labs. So if you look at the transistor, the semiconductor revolution, that came out of Bell Labs, right? As did so many other major innovations. Xerox PARC created a lot of fundamental technologies of the internet. And now when we look at AI, we see, okay, well, OpenAI created LLMs and all this stuff, but the paper, all you need is attention, that inspired LLMs and that created the actual fundamental underlying technology of LLMs. Where did that come out of? Like Google, I forget which division of Google, but it was a Google funded lab. It was a big corporate lab. And Google publishes so many papers in AI that they publish more papers in AI than any major university, and possibly any two major universities. And they are the engine of scientific publishing, and they funded this all through their monopoly profits from their search monopoly, right? And they funded this all through the profits from their search monopoly. And so I think that when you look at the engines of innovation, there's multiple ones. When you look at DARPA, right, that's another government thing, but it's not basic research, right? It's not the top of the funnel. It's actually near the bottom of the funnel, like DARPA creating lots of really usable products that then get commercialized and then get spun off, et cetera, et cetera. And so so I think that we need an all hands on deck approach to innovation. We need the government doing various things. We need large corporate labs. And of course, we need startups, both independent, bootstrapped and VC funded startups, and independent tinkerers and hobbyists and things like that. The problem of innovation is so hard to solve. This fact that there's not enough incentives for innovation, that we need to deploy incentives across a broad range of society. For a VC funded startup, the incentive is money, get rich so you can do whatever rich people now do, have a private jet. That is the incentive for venture funded startup people. But for scientists, the incentive is to have everyone think you're smart. Publish a bunch of papers, go to a bunch of conferences, get a Nobel Prize, whatever, like have everyone think you're the smartest person. And then for people in big corporate labs, there's other incentives too. Often they want to feel smart, as well. But then there's lots of incentives for the people who are publishing AI papers at Google besides money, although they get paid well. So we need to deploy incentives across a broad range of society, right? DARPA people want to help the country. They want to make America strong. It's nationalism, right? So we've got nationalism, intelligence, scientific ego. We've got money and all kinds of things, like all these incentives. And we need all these incentives to overcome the basic incentive problem of innovation, of technology. Because without all those incentives, we're going to just not do as well as we could. And that's a place I disagree with. I wouldn't say I disagree with Marc. I agree with his valorization of the independent inventor sort of VC funded startup model. I think that's great. I know a lot of great, awesome examples of that pushing forward innovation. I know lots of examples of stuff pushing forward innovation from other sectors of society. And I think we need to have an eclectic approach where we use everything. So that's one place I sort of disagree with Marc, at least in focus, right? Another place I disagree with Marc is about and I'm not 100% sure I disagree with him, because I think if I really pushed him, he'd agree with me. He just sounds like he disagrees in his manifesto. But I think the idea of sustainability, I think he's right that we have seen a number of people who just are mad that someone out there is getting rich, try to use sustainability as reasons to reduce the number of people who get rich. We've seen a lot of status anxiety from a lot of people, like using the idea of sustainability as a reason to degrow the economy, to slow down economic growth, to abolish capitalism, and blah, blah, blah. We've seen that, and that's bad, right? That's not good for society. Having status anxiety make us all poorer. We don't want that, right? We want a society that makes us all richer, and where people get over their status anxiety and like find other ways to think that they're good, But anyway, so he's right about that. But actual sustainability is incredibly important, and someone needs to be on that, right? Someone, like, we need people to really get on that, because if we simply burn our whole endowment, if we simply use up our whole endowment that nature has gifted us, and that's it, and then we're done in 100 years, right? We just extract with their same old machinery, which is what the Soviet Union did, and then we're done. We're like, okay, that's done. That was a nice party. Now we'll go back to being apes. Like, come on, no, let's not do that. Technology creates sustainability. Innovation goes toward making innovation sustainable. And it doesn't always do that enough, because people are short-termist, right? Like, most people are not sitting around thinking, I'd like to make the world a better place for my great grandchildren on another planet. A few people think like that. Most people don't think like that. And so society is naturally short-termist because of the generational problem. When I die, my grandkid is not me. And so I'm not considering, no one's thinking of the grandkids. No one's thinking of the great-grandkids. Like, maybe people are thinking of them a tiny, tiny bit, but not enough. We are short-termist beings. It's like we're running our whole society just based on quarterly earnings. And that's natural, right? It's natural from the fact that we have limited lifespans. Our limited lifespans make us short-termists. But the generations to come, the centuries and centuries of humanity to come, are important too. Those future potential people, their happiness, their experience of the world will be important. And we need mechanisms to make our society less short-termist. That is what sustainability is ultimately about. It's not ultimately about like degrowth or some, bullshit theory about how like we have to return to like $10,000 of per capita GDP, impoverish ourselves, or we'll destroy the planet. No, we've got to innovate more, right? And Marc talks about doing more with less, and how that's a fundamental part of innovation. He's absolutely right about that. And we must accelerate that kind of innovation. That kind of innovation is doubly underinvested in. It's an underinvested in for the reason all technology is underinvested in, because there's not enough, you don't capture the full benefits. There's that externality to begin with. On top of that, there's the short-termism problem. We underinvest in technology, and we underinvest in, we double underinvest in sustainability technology because of the short-termism problem. So we need to be attacking that short-termism problem by pouring extra resources into things that will benefit our great-grandchildren. Right, to cancel out our natural short-sightedness and short-termists of our limited lifespan.
That's a good overview. One way I'd sort of phrase Marc's argument is it's not only, or not even more so, that it's about the kind of lone individual versus the state, but really I think he sees the market as sort of simulating the sort of like Darwinian, natural selection environment where the solutions that work rise to the top, and the solutions that don't work fail. And thus we have this kind of iterated game that leads to the best outcomes. And he feels that organizations that are not, don't have the market environment, don't have those same competitive pressures, and thus we don't get the best solutions. And in fact, we get, sort of worse solutions that kind of, metastasize. And I think this is what he sees the nonprofit, world or the government world as. Someone once said something like, markets sometimes have market failures, i.e., externalities, but government programs always have externalities that are not baked in. And so he would love to see education, maybe healthcare, other things that are in the realm of government have those same accountability, measures, so that we get better outcomes. What would you say to that?
I would say that if you look at history, you see that we have consistently experimented and crossed the river by feeling the stones. And there's massive amounts of economic evidence that universal public education was a big, huge improvement on a world where education was a pure commodity that just rich people would buy for their kids. That it massively increased productivity and had lots of spillover benefits and blah, blah, blah. The whole reason you were able to have factories is because you had someone teaching the people to read. There's all kinds of reasons for that I won't go into right now. But the point is we determined like that the rich societies were the ones that had public education. Publicly funded infrastructure, often funded for the purpose of national defense, actually, or war, was incredibly important. And the infrastructure systems of countries that considered national defense and that publicly funded their infrastructure were much more efficient and just much better, created much bigger network effects than the infrastructure systems of countries where it was just a private thing. You would just let people build stuff and then charge tolls. And of course, this is true for the digital infrastructure as well. The basic infrastructure of the internet, we heavily promoted that with the government. And the countries that have heavily promoted that have just done a bit better. And so that doesn't mean you want to do everything through the government, obviously, but it means that sometimes you do, and experimentation is important. So sometimes you experiment with having the government do things. For example, Japan had the government build these amazing train systems and then found that they weren't really returning the money. They weren't really creating as much value, for the state as they wanted. So they privatized them. And so then a bunch of private companies bought the Japanese train system. And then they built a whole bunch of stores around the train stations because they bought that real estate, and they did real estate development to supplement the income from trains. And they found out that the financial returns were great. And so the privatized train system worked really well. The government built it originally because the government was responsible for sort of determining the right of way and eminent domaining all the land and blah, 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 and defeating all the NIMBYs, if there were any NIMBYs. The government did that. And then later it privatized, and the privatization worked well. So sometimes private works better, sometimes government works better, and often it's a combination of the two that works. And so you just have to figure out what works better and be agnostic about this, and figure out what increases productivity, what enables technology innovation, instead of pre-committing to an ideological idea. And I think that Americans are becoming more pragmatic. We are starting to leave behind the idea of government versus private sector. Many people obviously still have this idea, but I think that most people are beginning to have a more nuanced idea where, and you can see this in things like the YIMBY movement, the idea that YIMBYs support both housing deregulation and public housing. It's like, because ultimately they just want the housing, they want the thing. Get me the result. Don't think so hard about like the getting the right kind of procedure for getting the thing. Don't be so proceduralist, because ultimately saying government is better or private sector is better is proceduralist. It's like, I don't inherently care about either of those things. I inherently care about the things they produce, the results, the benefits. Give me the benefits. Give me the housing. Give me the transportation. Give me the energy. Give me the cool gadgets. Give me the life-saving medicine. Give me the things. Don't give me a way to get the things. Give me the things. And I think that focus on results instead of procedure, younger Americans, and many Americans are moving in that direction, not just younger Americans, but Americans in general move, and that's good. That's a good thing. We need to cast off this old idea of this one set procedure that we need to do to accelerate technological progress, and understand that what we need to do is focus on the goal.
I think that might be a good place to wrap. Any last thoughts here that we didn't yet get to, or a closing statement on sort of the manifesto or Techno-Optimism more broadly, or anything we discussed?
Oh, I think no. I mean, I think that we are entering a techno-optimist period. I would like to say, and that began with the success of mRNA vaccines and the success of solar power. And if you look at what's making Americans more techno-optimistic, it's not the latest phone app. Sometimes it's like ChatGPT, but it's stuff, It's things that produce tangible benefits for people. That's what's making people more techno-optimist. That's the hook, right? That's the thread to pull to get people to re-embrace and to love technology again, is concrete benefits that they get. And we're starting to get more technologies that obviously make people's lives better in very clearly unambiguous ways. And that's great, right? We have vaccines against malaria and cancer, right? Vaccines against cancer. That's so cool. Like, there'll be a time when cancer was this dread, like, oh my God, I got this scan and there's a little lump on the thing. I'm going to die now. My life is cancer life from now on. I'm dead. It's huge. It's a terror that so many people in our society have. Imagine if you get a vaccine and then you walk around and you're like, oh yeah, it's a little cancer. We'll clear that up with some immunotherapy. That would be an amazing future, right? A future where robots just follow you around and clean your house for you. Like in the Jetsons, we're finally going to get the Jetsons future. Right? Or like quadcopters will be our flying cars. And then we're finally going to get that future, right? A future where technology allows you to live wherever you want and work whenever you want, wherever you want, for whoever you want. That's really tangible benefits that we're going to get from those technologies or LLMs, technology where you can just like have LLMs like write you an email, sift through paperwork, go through all this, like your leasing agreement for your whatever, like just parse that and do all the legal crap. And like, that's going to be hugely tangible benefits. So I think that we're now in an era where technology is going to just produce so many tangible benefits for people that it won't seem like something that's just like, I guess some guys created a slightly different chat app and became billionaires. Woohoo, yay. It's like, that was, innovation in like 2013. I don't think that's going to be innovation in 2023.
Well, let's wrap on that. No, this is great. Great conversation. And until next time, as always.
Until next time.